So today on our podcast, we have Jecorey Arthur, candidate for Metro Council District 4. Jecorey has done so many things for our city, going viral for a new collaborative piece with Teddy Abrams, featured on PBS. One of the only Metro candidates actually to have his own Spotify. So we want to get to know the people that are going to hopefully be making the decisions in government and have a one-to-one conversation about, what we want to have for the future of Louisville. So, with that being said, welcome to the show, Jecorey.
I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be talking with folks who are, as I said earlier, doing the work that it takes to spread light on some of the darkness and do something about it.
For those that are not in the political know about what Metro Council is and how it factors into Louisville, I know that some people can still remember when there were aldermen. A brief rundown. So starting in 2003, we got the city and the county that merged into one government, where now instead of a board of aldermen, we got 26 council seats through Metro Council. Coming up for re-election every 4 years using a staggered process so that about half the seats are up every 2 years. And since the council's inception, Democrats have maintained a majority in the chamber with 19 members, but there are still a lot of problems with how those maps are divided. Currently, we have a lot of barriers to how they're divided, mainly on I-264, Beargrass Creek being major dividing lines between District 10, District 4, a couple of these other places. And, District 4 takes a wide variety of neighborhoods. You got Butchertown all the way over to Portland and Russell, south to Smoketown, across the train tracks into a little bit of Merriweather. So, Jecorey, how did you take that initial jump into thinking that, Metro Council could be something that you'd be interested in?
Well, to give context, I'm Black. and even beyond just merely being Black by complexion, I'm Black by consciousness and culture. I descend from slavery. My great-great-great-grandmothers helped build this country, helped build this city. And when you look at the landscape of being Black in America and descending from slavery, you're looking at, of course, 250 years of chattel slavery, but also 100 years of legal segregation and Jim Crow, and so many legal and illegal discriminatory practices when it comes to education, healthcare, housing, business. The list goes on and on and on. And then, of course, post Jim Crow, or neo Jim Crow, like I like to call Jim Crow Jr., we have discriminatory practices when it comes to incarceration, when it comes to the way that we criminalize drugs, whether that's usage or trafficking. So adding it all up, it's like 400 plus years of so much turmoil and terrorism and just being a bottom caste within the country that we live in. And Louisville as a city is no different, even though we like to consider ourselves as the compassionate city of the South or of the country, or we like to consider ourselves as progressive or possibility city. Louisville, just like so many other cities in this state, was built by slaves. And when freed slaves or runaway slaves got to Louisville, oftentimes they didn't stop. They ran across the Ohio River. And Malcolm X always said, people talk about the South all the time. As long as you south of the Canadian borders, you're in the South. So with all that being said, I was born in 1992. When I was born, 21% of Black Louisville lived in poverty. It's 2020. I'm 27 years old. Almost 3 decades of my life have gone by. And now 35% of Black Louisville lives in poverty. And that's just for me and my people. But for all of us as people, as humans, what do those numbers look like? What does it look like in terms of homelessness in District 4, where we have the highest concentration of homeless? We have the highest concentration of violence. We have the highest concentration of crimes in general. We have so many issues within District 4 itself that I would say for just the overall look at the city, bring our city down. So if we can fix those issues in District 4, we can fix them anywhere. I was already in a political mindset shift as far as how to change this city, because I've been rapping about it for years. I've been teaching about it for years. But when it comes to actually doing something about it and mobilizing people and lobbying people and writing legislation, I realized that a political seat or some political power was the only way to impact that. So you can push those politicians or you can be those politicians. Mm-hmm. So whether I'm in Metro Council or not, we're going to be doing this work to make our city a better place. It just might be a little bit easier on Metro Council. I will say this. People better hope I win, because if I do lose and I'm not in Metro Council, we're going to be even more loud. We're going to be even more in people's faces with this data. I'm going to take some of the maps y'all got. We're going to get some.
Absolutely.
All about political issues, even more so than the other ones. Like, we got to be loud about these issues that exist. Can't just shy away from it anymore. And I've always been about making sure I'm screaming at the top of my lungs what's happening where I'm from, what's happening to my people in our neighborhoods. I don't care if I'm at a derby party with a bunch of rich folks. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk about gentrification. I'm going to talk to you about slavery. I'm going to talk to you about Jim Crow, because we still haven't healed from it. We're still definitely much so bleeding from those wounds. So that's a lot for what might seem like a little question. Why are you running? What got you into running? But we got so many issues that need to be addressed. And in office, I'm going to be the connector who, of course, puts people with resources as they need them. I'm going to be the protector to take care of our people, make sure they're safe. I'm going to be the collector to make sure everybody get everything that they're owed and that they're due as far as their finances go and their economic conditions. And I will not be what so many politicians before me have been, which is a neglector.
With being a creative person, being an artist before you got into politics, has there been anything that has surprised you jumping between two worlds? Do you have any advice for any other creative-minded people that might be thinking about politics?
Yeah, everybody was in my ear when I first decided to run about how to talk, how to dress, what to be like. And it felt like, this is exactly why people don't trust politicians. Mm-hmm. This is exactly why we're in the predicament we're in now when it comes to politics dropping the ball in so many areas of life. Be yourself. I don't care. I would rather lose being myself than win being somebody else. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be me. I'm going to talk how I talk. I'm going to dress how I dress. And that's that. So for any creatives, whether you're a musician, you're a visual artist, you're a sculptor, whatever you do as a creative, be yourself if you decide to get into the political world. I'll also say it's important to realize what you have done in the past is incredibly important. So if you're a musician and you've never created social conscious music, you've never been an activist, you've never advocated for anything as far as political issues go, you have a huge learning curve. I luckily have already been in those spaces, already been talking that talk for a very long time. I feel like I've been campaigning for 5 years already. So it's a natural transition. But it's important to realize where you've been. It's also important to realize what you're doing right now in that moment, and not just focus on what you want to do in the future. So many politicians sell you on hopes and dreams of the future. But when you look at what I've done and when you look at what I'm doing right now, I don't necessarily have to just sell you on hope. I've taught hundreds of thousands of kids around the world. I've helped serve hundreds of libraries, community centers, after-school programs, schools. I've hired thousands of people here in this city to get paid for gigs. I have already been doing a lot of this work in terms of advocacy and change. But now I'm trying to do it officially from an elected official capacity.
I think you kind of reflect a lot of the stuff that we're looking for kind of as a new generation, and generations that are older us and also younger. They are looking for more authentic people, more authentic, politicians basically that are coming. And I think that's kind of what we're searching for. Maybe not what we've quite found and everything, but I hopefully see an Andy Bashir and stuff like that, more authentic, caring politicians is kind of what we're looking for. So it's very good advice.
And do you think that going forward in the public sphere, we're seeing a lot of more, even Andy Bashir's calling it street art now, with the chalk on the sidewalks. There's been a lot more growing acceptance of art in the public realm. And, to the point where we're actually getting people asking us, can you fix our alleys? Can you do something about this thing going in on our backyard? Whereas before, people would just completely write it off as it's going to get trashed.
It's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So we were wondering about your basic opinion on the difference between vandalism and street art.
I'm in the hood. Mm-hmm. Vandalism is street art.
Yeah.
I have a 2.5-year-old son, and not too long ago, we purchased these bathtub crayons. And in the tile in the restroom, closest to his room, he was drawing on the walls with these crayons. And when he first opened them up and he looked at me like he was about to be in trouble. And it broke my heart to think he's already conditioned at 2.5 to realize that he's not allowed to draw on the walls. Now, of course, there's social conditioning and norms when it comes to where you can and cannot make art. Mm-hmm. But I think when we become adults and the older we get, the more we age, we lose that sense of creativity and artisticness. But when you look at humanity, when you look at the future, when you look at history, art is what reflects those times. And I've been saying this about the Lift Up Blue song. Mm-hmm. That is an fact. 100 years from now, when you look at the pandemic and what was going on in Louisville, I truly believe that song will be pulled out of, a pile of debris of what was known as COVID-19 pandemic. And people will look at that moment and say, oh, that's what was going on in Louisville. We have musicians coming together. We have people coming together. We have frontline workers going crazy with the overtime to make sure that we're protected and taken care of. And I hope 100 years from now, at that point, we take care of them in the same way they've been taking care of us in this moment. You can't spell artifact without art. And that's a fact.
Yeah, there you go.
And I know we all heard the Lift Up Blue song, thought it was great, very much enjoyed it, really appreciated that contribution and everything. Do you think that if you do make it to Metro Council, that there'll still be a space for you to make music and perhaps put out music, or do you think that'll go on the back burner as you kind of pursue Metro Council and if you were to be in Metro Council?
So I will have to prioritize Metro Council professionally over anything else in my life, because I'm not just a musician who makes music and I entertain and whatnot. 1200 is a business. 1200 LLC exists as a company. Mm-hmm. Hire musicians and artists around town. We collaborate with organizations, and some of those organizations get dollars from Metro government. So I can't perform with the Louisville Orchestra anymore and get paid for it, at least. Okay. In Parkland, where I'm born and raised, I'm creating an outdoor plaza that we just signed a lease on that's a permanent space now. I can't have the same position as I did as an artist or as an arts organizer on Metro Council just because there's a huge conflict of interest. And I could and just recuse myself from voting, but the 30,000 people who live in our district deserve someone that's going to be able to represent them, fight for them, but also fight with them. So I have to put Metro Council on the front burner, and everything else has to go in the refrigerator.
Do you think that you could ever, if there's any opponent in Metro Council when you get elected that is doing anything, that they might have a diss track coming or anything? You're one of the only people to be able to actually put out music in expression of your opposition to political things in council. I don't know if we've ever had a politician that's been able to express themselves musically before.
So if you're asking if I'm going to diss other politicians when there's political opposition, hell yeah, I am.
Yes. Yeah, nice.
When we were knocking on doors before this pandemic occurred, I learned so much about people's perspective of just the political landscape of Louisville. I can't tell you how many people said, I'm going to vote for you just because you're Democrat. How many people said, I'm going to vote for you just because you're black. I can't wait until this election is over so I can properly educate folks, people who are my elders as well, about why that's dangerous, and playing identity politics is not for the betterment of our people. Because just because I'm black don't mean I'm thinking black, or just because I'm a Democrat don't mean I share some of those values. Like, I would say I don't know much of anything about being a Democrat. I just know that there's 13,000 Democrats in this district, maybe a few thousand Republicans. Mm-hmm. So by the numbers, mathematically, I was never going to win as a Republican. So I had no choice but to file as a Democrat. That doesn't mean I don't align with some of the Democratic values. It just means I'm not married to a party. I'm married to interests. I'm married to the people's interests that I represent. I'm only in that office for the people that I serve. No other reason or purpose.
And, this is a perfect segue. Tell us more about Louisville for All. Based on, we've checked out your website. We have a lot of moving parts with this: money, housing, safety, health, inclusion, and you have a huge amount of previous work. The plaza that you've done in Parkland, being able to turn and reclaim space in a formerly industrial area, a place that other people have written off. What do you think is your first goal going into Metro Council when you have all the political momentum?
The first goal is communication that hopefully results in education. And I say that coming from a 27-year-old's mouth. Barbara Sexton Smith is an elder, and I respect her so much. She has not engaged every person in this district in a way that is suitable and appropriate for them. District 4 needs a Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram, a Snapchat, a TikTok, a YouTube, with the second biggest search engine in the world, owned by the first biggest search engine in the world. We need all of those platforms. We also need to take some of the tools we've used in the campaign, like phone blast that put out broadcasted messages to our seniors who don't have access to those, or the email that she sends out. We need to send out text blasts. We need to be communicating with our constituents in every single way possible. So that communication piece is going to be my initial kind of kickoff in terms of, okay, new, fresh, young blood in this office. Mm-hmm. 2, that education piece. We are having a District 4 summit every year, maybe even twice, 3 times, 4 times a year, where all 16 of the neighborhoods from Russell to Butchertown to Smoketown, every neighborhood is going to have representation at that summit. We're going to talk about issues that exist in our neighborhoods. We're going to share resources. We're going to figure out, how do we get a grocery store across this district, a full service grocery store, which we do not have? Mm-hmm. How are we going to combat homelessness that exists in the 40202 zip code, higher than any other area in this state? How are we going to combat the issues that we face as a district? I'm also going to, hopefully, which unfortunately a lot of my constituents will push back on me about this, I'm going to fight for equitable neighborhood funds from the NDF, because all of that money that exists from the government is just up for grabs from neighborhoods. There's no accountability as far as where it goes and who it goes to and what their overall wealth or income and conditions are where they live in. Nobody in Russell should be fighting for the same pot of money as somebody in the original Highlands, which is also a part of this district. Those are 2 completely different wealth positions of classes in Louisville. So we need to have a conversation about how to make NDF equitable, and also how to make some of the resources that we allocate equitable. And I'm not as much into some of the services that we offer as a government, and that, just to supplement what people should be getting just naturally as being humans and having rights. So when it comes to a lot of the charity efforts that exist, I'm not with it. How do we fix the conditions so that we don't have to do charity? Mm-hmm. How do we fix the conditions so we don't have to hand out turkeys at Thanksgiving? And I'm vegetarian, so I ain't handing out turkeys anyway. But how do we get to the root causes of some of these issues that exist, fix it, and in the long term, we're going to save money because we don't have to provide some of these services anymore, or as many services as we did to begin with. So number 1, that communication piece. Number 2, that education piece. And then I would say number 3 is reparations.
For something that can be done right now during quarantine, COVID-19, with a lot of Louisvillians out of work, a lot of Louisvillians stuck at home with, hope kind of at the minimum right now, what is one thing that you think the average Louisvillian can do right now to make a difference and make a change in our city?
One thing that the average Louisvillian could do right now in this moment, I would say go through your contacts and hit people up. Our campaign has been doing wellness checks, and we'll kind of go full-fledged with them this coming week, but call somebody, hit somebody up, check on somebody. Wellness checks, so incredibly important. We got thousands of seniors specifically in this district who feel alone, like they don't have anyone, and they were already somewhat a forgotten about population, but now it's even worse, and they're scared, and there's a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty, and we got to make sure that we're checking on our folks. So I would say call people, check on people in your phone and otherwise. Hell, call a random number that you don't even know, 502, and put in 7 digits.
I guess to keep it Beargrass Creek, I might as well give one little plug for Beargrass Creek. Jecorey, I don't know if you've seen the KIPDA, basically the overarching transportation plan that is shared between Kentucky and Indiana metros. So they allocate federal funding for transportation dollars. So any kind of federal block grant is allocated to KIPDA and then distributed between all of the different suburbs, major city. And what we found is that while interstate funding for widening the interstate, specifically 71, 265 out in the East End, has been fast-tracked in recent years, Beargrass Creek Greenways, which is putting a greenway on all 3 forks of Beargrass Creek and actually connecting Butchertown south all the way to Buchel and where Bashford Manor Mall is, has been pushed to 2035 for completion. And so, it's one thing that we've seen to see this plan, and, there's been, again, study after study with where to put the different roads, where to build the trails, but, until something actually gets done, all it is paper. And there are neighborhoods, Smoketown especially, that you've seen the census data. Beargrass Creek is a literal barrier, a wall, so to speak, between the original Highlands, Paristown Point, Lambton Street, Fenzer Street. Those bridges don't even exist anymore, and trying to figure out ways to actually, like one, cross this divide by a vehicle or a pedestrian bike. That's one thing, but it's also a very much a mental barrier for folks that have lived in that neighborhood their entire lives for decades. And, they know that once they cross, Beargrass Creek, it's a completely different world, and so part of the thing that we are, really trying to focus on is just bringing the word out about Beargrass Creek, because I feel like before we really started this, people really just thought it was a ditch, and they just thought that it was just something that they would, easy to dump into.
Yeah, something to take for granted.
Yeah, a ton of needles and homeless camps, right? And what we've seen is that when we're doing this advocacy, we're finding a lot of hyper-localized neighborhoods. People really, really love their neighborhood, and once that problem is out of their neighborhood, it's not their problem anymore.
So to kind of take all of that and make it into a question, something that we talk about a lot here in Beargrass Thunder, and that we've found, that's brought our attention to, are these one-way streets, and also the disconnectivity from neighborhoods that have availability to cars, and then no availability cars, and the ones who don't have availability cars can't, have that access across. So it's because this money is kind of being pushed back to 2035. What do you think a Metro Council can kind of do to focus on transportation, perhaps, that might connect our city better as a whole? Is it getting rid of these one-ways? Is it, creating, a way to get over 264 with walking? Is it bikes? Is it, what is it, that you think is going to be, the next step in transportation?
Let's put you on the spot.
Sorry, that's a big question. Instead of just one thing, you can pick from whatever you may kind of have on your mind there.
So I'll say this before I respond. I don't believe Louisville should be so worried about copying, mimicking other cities that might be larger than us, in a sense more progressive or successful than us. But I do believe in best practices and dumping out all the Lego pieces and seeing what we can build just from all ideas collectively. So as a musician, being able to travel and tour to different cities around the country and even outside of the country, I've noticed how public transportation has a web of options. Those options are limited within Louisville. I'm also aware that we have, maybe 3% of our population utilizing public transportation. And I'm also very much so aware of the need, because I live in Russell, where 47% of the households don't have vehicles. So the need is there. The want is something that I still think is up in the air. Not too long ago, Leo Weekly had it might have been a cover story that shared a concept for rapid transportation, and I loved it. It almost
we had that copy in the house, yeah.
Yeah. It almost made me feel like I was in like a futuristic type Louisville. Not even another city, just a future us, a better us. I'm very much so a proponent of that rapid transit and doing what we can to collaborate with the means of transportation that already exist and coming down and decreasing our single occupancy traffic, because we have a whole lot. I was reading something not too long ago. Did you send me something that said that Louisville?
Probably.
That's insane. That Louisville has the highest, in terms of the rate of the people that are traveling, the highest in the country. I think you sent that to me.
Yeah, no, it's mind-boggling. You know, especially when you think of the fact that Louisville, back when we had an operational streetcar system, we were actually one of the first cities in the South to have a fully desegregated streetcar system because of protests that had been going on, and because streetcars, you know, back in the 30s through the 50s, they were completely dismantled, you know, paved over. We don't that entire network doesn't even exist anymore.
But going back to the root of your question, we need accountability groups for all of these issues, specifically this one. What does it look like for a Metro Council person to say, hey, to you three, could you form a committee of some sort on public transportation that not just functions as a government entity, but as a people entity that exists for the people who live in the neighborhoods, who do the work, who are tied into the neighborhood associations, who walk and drive and play in these streets that we're talking about, and making sure that that group is holding us accountable for how we move forward. Because when I think of issues, I'm thinking of a symphony orchestra. You got your brass section, and not all of them are playing the same instrument. You got your tuba handling the low end. You got your trumpets handling the high end. French horns handling the mid-range, all right? You got your percussion section. You got your strings. Why don't we break up issues within the city in the same exact way? Because as a Metro Council person, I can't handle everything. But what I can do is try and connect us all, which I've been doing that my whole life, connect us all to address those issues. So if you all are caring about public transportation, I might have another group over here who are, you know, they care about gun violence. Another group over here who cares about homelessness. And let's organize in that fashion and then come together at a summit or a citywide summit where organizers and activists meet and share and propose these ideas and move forward on it. We got a whole lot of talking and not a lot of action when it comes to the way that we operate in this city. And I know firsthand, just from being a part of all of these initiatives, from the streets to the stages to the schools, I've been all in those spaces, and it's just a lot of talk, a lot of incredible ideas, but not a lot of action behind them. But as one person, I won't be able to do everything on my own. We got to do it as a team, as a group, as a unit. I'll also add that I was on the board for the Downtown Partnership, Louisville Downtown Partnership, when we were having discussions about converting two-way streets. And I had to step down from the board, so there was no, accuse of conflict of interest. What I learned from that experience was it's very important to, as we make these changes to our physical infrastructure, is to communicate them with people as much as possible. Because I don't know if you've been over on 3rd Street right before it hits Broadway recently, or not so much anymore because nobody's really out on the streets. But like a few months ago, anytime I was in that area, it was just so congested. But I'm hoping long term what it does is that two-way street conversion helps businesses because they get traffic on both sides now. It helps with walkability because cars are driving slower. They're not just speeding through neighborhoods. And also it's going to impact the neighborhoods because so many District 4 neighborhoods have expressed to me, and I've noticed living in them, is that these are pass-throughs just to get in and out of downtown as quickly as you can. And that is so dangerous. So dangerous. My kid already can't play in the backyard because there's syringes from drug abusers and users. And he also can't play in the front because we're right on West Jefferson Street. So we got to do something about the physical infrastructure, educate people on it, and make sure there's a full plan that's well thought out before we roll it out and impact people's lives and the way that they commute. So I got a question for you all.
Thank you.
How do you deal with the data? One of my favorite homies up in Boston, his name is Reggie from Boston. He always says, you better deal with the data before it deals with you. And we've shared some data, you shared maps, you shared links, and so much that I've absorbed and taken in. What are the next steps for taking that data, taking those maps, and doing something about the issues that exist on them, but also taking what we see and making it happen? Because when you Google West Louisville, you see a bunch of renderings, you see a bunch of CGI, you see a bunch of proposals of projects that are unfinished. Some of them are works, but it almost looks like hopelessness. And I want to make sure that as we do this work, as I rap about it, as you all draw about it and type about it and blog about it and article and just shout about it and make it known and we educate people, we take that next step as well as doing something about that education. So in your opinion, or your educated opinion, how do we deal with the data?
So my background is actually in pharmacy. So I have a doctorate in pharmacy. I went up and I got that at Duquesne University. So being in a background of science and also being politically interested, I've kind of taken that data as almost gold, I feel, to us when it comes to getting these things done. Because when you ask for things either in a scientific or a medical community, it has to be A, B, C. It has to have those numbers and it has to have exactly what you want. So when we have this data and it's in our possession, and data is not always going to say what we want it to say either. That's the thing. Data is the truth. As long as you're using it and not manipulating it either. So creating that data and having it, that's what we can take to kind of create, educate, and involve people. Because numbers are really something that you can't change.
Right.
But it's a matter of marketing that number, too. For what we've been able to do, we would never have had the same amount of success if we had taken all of these different maps and gone into the Bardstown Road Neighborhood Association and be like, hey, Grinstead Drive, it only turns into a one-way street once it crosses Beargrass Creek. And they would immediately say, well, it crosses Beargrass Creek, that's not a District 8 problem. And so the thing is that if you say, hey, listen, if you are able to improve Grinstead and Bardstown Road, Grinstead Drive is one of the most heavy commuter roads in the city linking all kinds of neighborhoods. Wouldn't you want to have a little bit safer road to cross? Then it becomes their problem, right? Everybody wants a safe road.
Yeah, it's about including all of that, and then once you kind of have that data, that picture that Jody has, once you have all these artistic renderings and these talkings and everything we want, when you have the actual numbers that are behind it, you have the power and the equipment that you need to be talking to people.
And what we found is that by getting as many different neighborhood associations involved, it really helps make the case for building that kind of solidarity about, hey, we have Beargrass Creek in our backyard too, even though I'm upstream from y'all, and by the time the water actually reaches Smoketown, it's so polluted there's barely anything that can survive there, right? But when Beargrass Creek is by the zoo and it's not in that concrete ditch yet, it's back out in the suburbs because it only turns into that concrete ditch once it really gets to Germantown. So those we've actually been contacted by a few neighbors who are completely unrelated to any of our existing lobbying who said, hey, I saw a YouTube video, I got so inspired, I'm contacting my council person, we have so much honeysuckle in our backyard, I'm single-handedly getting my entire neighborhood to sign on to this. And that's something I never even considered, right? That's something that just evolved out of us just trying to educate.
Yeah, I think that's something that you've touched on talking about District 4 too. It's very interesting. It's a huge, huge district, many neighborhoods in Louisville. So, we're all about having Louisville kind of come together, to help each individual neighborhood, but, as a whole, a city to have that good look.
I love what you were saying about getting people to realize this is an issue across your neighborhood borders or across your district borders. Because when I talk Black issues, a lot of times people who just aren't conscious of our entire city and the way that it operates and, like I said, that social web, that social political web, they think, well, that issue in Russell doesn't matter over here in Butchertown. Actually, it does.
It does.
And when I'm talking about in the Central Business District, you know, wouldn't you want the economic conditions of some of the poorest people in this city to be fixed so they can patron your business? Wouldn't you want new business, that new booming, more employees? It's all connected for sure, whether it's Beargrass Creek or it's homelessness and them patroning your business or not, just because of the economic conditions. So, yes, I love that. I love that. I love that. Making those connections is so important. You also just reminded me with your shirt, the Colonels.
Yeah, I got Kentucky Colonel.
Somebody, I'm getting a phone call about the Colonels. They got a group put together that's like trying to pull them back into the city. So that'll definitely be something that I'm thinking about from the councils. Like, how can we, bring that back, make some jobs, get some more money for the city?
Well, Jecorey, thank you so much for being on this. I feel like I've learned a lot about you. I feel like I've learned a lot about your campaign. Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
JecoreyArthur.com.
Nice.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all over the place. Hit me up. I want to talk to as many people as I possibly can to better learn. I'm a teacher, but I also believe I'm a student. As I teach, I learn. As I learn, I teach. So anything that I can learn, like, keep hitting me up with maps, research, data, everything. And I want to be an advocate for you as well.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. You have a good one. We'll speak to you later.
Hopefully after quarantine, we'll have a real life meeting.
One day.
Take care.